Hey there, everyone, and welcome along to my event this afternoon. If you're watching in BST, called Heart with Ears, Navigating Connection Through Listening and Empathy. And it's an absolute pleasure to be here with you today. My name is Sam Moynier, if you don't know who I am. I'm the founder of Student Breakthrough and the Educators Coaching Academy. And my aim in this life is to revolutionize well-being for young people so that we can create lasting change for future generations. Now, today I've got a really exciting event for you, and I've done some live sessions before, but I've never given a whole hour talk. So if you are with me today, welcome along, and please do get involved as we're going to make this as interactive as possible. So comment in the chat, let me know if you're watching, give us a like, because what I'm going to share with you are some simple coaching tips and simple strategies that I've learned in my 10 years as an educator. And I'll get onto my story in a little bit, but if you're someone who is working with young people at the moment, if you're a parent, a teacher, a youth worker, a mentor, whatever, and you want to build deeper connections with those young people, then this is the event for you. On this event, we're going to share a few simple strategies you can deepen your relationships with those important children in your life, but also learn how to create some more, authentic connection with people. And it doesn't have to be just students, it can be absolutely anyone. So what we'll do, we'll get started. And like I said, please do get involved in this. Comment below, let me know how you're getting on with the event. And I thought I'd set the scene with a bit about my story, because some people might not know me here on I've got LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube up. So I always share my story because it's important to set the scene. But I've been running this business now for 6 years, and we've trained hundreds of teachers. I've worked with thousands of students, and probably hundreds of parents as well alongside that. And things have gone really, really well. There's been some great success with the business, but it wasn't always like that. And I want to take you back to where it all began for me, because I don't know about you, but I never wanted to be a teacher. All I wanted to be was a soldier. That was my dream as a kid. All I was focused on was joining the British Army, because that's what my dad did. That's what my dad served his country. And I thought, well, I can do that as well. And I made the decision as a 10-year-old. I remember being like, wow, how can I live up to my dad? My dad was my superhero. How can I live up to him? And I thought, well, one thing I could do would be to follow in his footsteps, right? And take on the belief that I had to join the army. Now, I love sharing this distinction. And if you're watching this, you can jot it down. That word belief, just checking out my LinkedIn here. That word belief, if you write the word down, it really has the word lie in it, L-I-E. And I took on the assumption that I had to do this with my dad. And team, I got accepted into the British Army back in 2012. And I was so ecstatic. If you can go back to what life was like for you and just imagine achieving a dream, that's what happened for me in 2012. And I was absolutely over the moon. And I felt like I finally gained that love and connection from my dad, which I think as guys, we're always craving. But what I didn't realize was that life is a great way of pulling that rug or carpet underneath us. And I want you to imagine a time when life wasn't going so well for you. All right, so flip back to a time when you were struggling, perhaps where things weren't going so well for you. And just step into that moment and really experience that moment. Because for me, 2 weeks after I got accepted, I got another letter through the post from the army, and I wasn't expecting this letter, but this letter flipped my whole world 180. And what I discovered was that failure is a blessing, but I didn't know this at the time. And what I found out in that letter was that, Sam, unfortunately, you have failed the army medical exam. And there were 2 words on this letter that stood out to me, and it was the words Crohn's and disease. And I've been struggling with my health for a couple of years, but I got this diagnosis of Crohn's, and I didn't know really what it was. But for the first time, my dream was taken away from me. And for the first time in my life at 21, I experienced extreme failure and setbacks linking to this medical condition. And I remember collapsing onto the floor. And I was 21 years old, and I pulled my knees into my chest and just burst into tears. Because for the last 11 years of my life, all I wanted to do was be a soldier, make my dad proud of me, join the army. That's all my assumption, my belief was. And it got taken away. But actually, in that moment of failure was really the kickstart to everything I'm doing now in education. So that moment was really tough to experience. And I bummed around a little bit, doing random jobs and working in coffee shops and other things. And then eventually my mum and dad were like, well, Sam, what are you going to do? Right? You got to do something. And I thought, well, I could become a teacher. My mum was a teacher. I could be a teacher. So I became a history teacher in secondary school, just outside Milton Keynes, where I'm from. But what I see with teachers I work with now, looking back at my own journey, was that we take obviously all our own pain, challenges, and setbacks into a new experience. In this case, it was me teaching. But what I didn't realize was that teaching kids would exaggerate all of these struggles I was currently facing. I was having flare-ups of my Crohn's. My mental health was starting to deteriorate. And as a teacher, I started to crumble. And it got to the point where I couldn't get into school and teach. And it wasn't by choice. It was like someone was pinning me against a wall and holding me there. I just couldn't get through this like invisible wall of anxiety. And it got to the point where eventually I made it into school, and I was so happy one day. This was in 2015, and I made it into school finally to teach my year 11 class, a load of 16-year-olds in the room. And I walked into the room and I had a smile on my face like this, because I was masking how I was really feeling. And I walked into the room, and I remember seeing the group of students, and there was a student at the front of the class, and I remember she asked me a question. And it stays with me, like in my mind, which was, "Sir, how are you feeling?" And I remember lying to her. And I said, girl's name, "I'm fine. I'm absolutely fine. Don't worry." But in that moment, it was something where I really started to experience emotion coming up, because I was lying to this student, and our bodies are the greatest lie detectors, and when I was at such a low point, I started to feel these emotions, these tears, these tears literally rolling down my face. Because when I said fine, it was literally like feelings inside not expressed. I was not expressing how I was truly feeling. I was lying, which I mean, a lot of people, and we do this, right? Yeah, I'm not bad. I'm fine. I'm whatever. I'm okay. But how are you really feeling? And I grabbed my ball pen, span around from the class, and pretended to write on the whiteboard because I had tears rolling down my face. Now, this was the moment as a teacher where I was so broken. I was so lost. And I didn't really know where to turn, because I didn't want to show weakness to my, to my boss. I definitely didn't want to show weakness with the kids. So I bottled it up. But eventually this moment was the tipping point. And sometimes, when you're at the bottom of the mountain, there's only one way up. And this event is also about coaching skills. And I met someone that changed my life. And if you're watching this, I'd love for you to think back to someone, who really impacted your life. On the 23rd of April, 2015, I had my first ever coaching session. And this was something that I had no idea what it was going to be like. It was, totally unexpected. And I joined this coaching session, and the guy just did some really simple things. And the first thing he did was listen to me, right? Like this event, he was a heart with ears. He truly listened to understand what was going on for me. The other thing he did was ask me some questions, that started with what, how, or why. And following on, he just gave me some silence and some space. But like as a broken, upset, challenged young guy, this was transformational in itself. And I learned to express and not suppress how I was feeling. I repeat, I learned to express and not suppress how I really felt. Transformational moment. If you've ever had that moment of like the light bulb or the sudden clarity, it's like everything was clear in the world for the first time in years. It was absolutely amazing. And I remember walking around the park in Milton Keynes where I was living, and I just felt so happy. For the first time in years, I felt this extreme elation of how I was really feeling. And I went back into school the next day, get this, right? And it was like having the rocket boosters on. I just fell in love with teaching, fell in love with education and working with young people. But over time, I started to see kids that were struggling with anxiety, not feeling good enough, and actually just not being motivated to achieve their full potential. And as a teacher, I got really frustrated that I didn't have the skills to better support these children in my care. And it got to the point where I wanted to help them, but I didn't know how. I didn't really know how to help myself. So I had the insight, the awareness, what if I became a counselor? Or what if I became a therapist? What if I became a coach? And I came down on coaching because it helped me so much with my mental health. And I became a qualified coach in 2017 and made my own program called the 3Bs: Boost, Believe, and Breakthrough. And I started to work with young people and coach them in my break times after school. And it was being hit by a thunderbolt when I left these sessions. It was like, I don't know if you've ever been hit by life's purpose, but it was like that. It was getting fully hit by life's purpose. And I was like, wow, this is really what I want to be doing. And I made the brave decision about 6 years ago to the day to leave teaching and to leave the classroom, which was really scary. But I wanted to set up my student business. I wanted to live with freedom. I wanted to, work for myself. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And I left teaching. And 3 months later, quickly found myself back in a supply teaching job. But in that moment, I was then able to start my coaching skills again, working with Pupil Premium, looked after children, and really started to make a difference in the school. And it gave me enough sort of a base layer, right, to really understand that this is, I can do this for a career. And I was doing other things during this time. And just after the pandemic, the last part of this story was that a school said, Sam, can you train our staff in what you do? And I was like, yeah, sure, I can train your staff in coaching. And I jumped to the opportunity. I said yes. So important as a start as an entrepreneur to say yes, I feel. Great bit of advice. Say yes and make it up later. And I said yes. And I trained these staff on a fairly rough and ready coach training program that was learning to help them better support the kids through coaching. That was the aim. And what I started to see was that this amazing symbiotic 2-for-1 relationship was being formed. The fact that the teachers were learning how to better support the students, and the teachers were also supporting themselves along the way. So I was just ecstatic by this. And we've started to get the impacts and the results from teachers. And one thing, I've trained hundreds of teachers now, from nursery schools to universities. We've got teachers at the moment in Chile, in Argentina, in Cuba on our programs and further afield. And one thing that always stands out to people that go through the Educators Coaching Academy program is the fact that they improve their skills as a listener. And they build the skill of empathy. They do the reps. They get that muscle nice and strong. And they learn how to better connect with people in their world. So that was my purpose. And that is still my purpose. And the Educators Coaching Academy is here to transform emotional support in schools using coaching and creating coaching cultures in as many educational establishments as possible. That's the aim, alongside a bit of education disruption, because we know the challenges that we face in education. Now, my favorite quote, which if you're a teacher, you'll definitely get on board with this, is that it is easier to build strong children than to repair broken adults. And that's really what we're doing here as teachers, right? The more work we can do with a young person in the early years, then they're not going to be the person that has a breakdown or cries in front of a group of students, let's say. They've got more skills and tools to help themselves now and not push those problems away into the future. And I think when we're going through coach training, we're not going to move mountains necessarily. We're not going to transform the education system overnight. It's a huge beast, that education system. But, a person that begins by moving a mountain begins by carrying away small stones. And actually, if you can learn one thing from this event, then it can create that little ripple effect, that drop on the pond that can help someone else, maybe a young person, a person in your family or your friends. So that's what's on offer for you. So let's get into our event. I wish I could see people's faces, but maybe we can meet one day. If this is landing, feel free to comment in the chat. Cheers, Aslam. Great to see you, mate. If you haven't checked out Aslam's podcast, I was like, a pleasure to be involved in it. He made a great reel for me as well. With the Spider-Man thing, so check that out. Great lad. Good to see you here. So let's get into the breakthrough basics. First way to keep me going about coaching. Nice one, mate. Cheers. Appreciate it. Good to see people here. So if you've got a pen and paper, I suggest you want to take it, or invite you to take a little note here. I'm going to share with you our breakthrough basics. If you want to draw a little triangle into your notes, I've hurt my shoulder recently, so I'm overcoming shoulder surgery. So there's my little triangle. This is our model. It's called the breakthrough basics. I might actually just type here. At the bottom of the triangle, we've got listening. Hopefully that can be posted. It's on Facebook and YouTube. On the left-hand side of that triangle, we've got questions. And on the right-hand side, we got silence. So that's our breakthrough basics: listening, questioning, and silence. And these form really simple coaching tools, which if you've done any sort of coach training will be familiar. But if you haven't, then this is really exciting. And I always find with anything that I've done in my life, when it comes to like professional development, the simple stuff works. You know, there's some people have so many complicated models and things, and we just want to keep it simple. You know, KISS, keep it simple, stupid. But simple is effective. The brain loves simplicity. And in this way, we're going to learn how to better connect with people and bring coaching into your classroom. So it starts with listening. And I think there's two types of listening. You might have heard of like level 1, level 2. You might have heard of active or passive. And you also might have heard in our world, breakthrough or backward. And backward listening, I'll give you an example. I live in Lisbon here in Portugal. And I got an Uber to my friend's house, where I'm doing this event. And in the Uber, I was chatting to the guy in my very broken Portuguese, eu falo pouco português. And I was listening to him, but I wasn't really thinking like what was going on for him, right? I wasn't really putting too much attention on what he was experiencing. I was just talking and listening to keep the conversation flowing. And that was a challenge because I wasn't really connecting with him. I was using backward listening, just listening for the sake of myself. It's a selfish type of listening. Human beings are selfish. And actually the listening and doing the reps takes a lot of energy. So that's one way of listening, which is backward. Listening for the sake of yourself and not someone else. You call it passive, you call it level 1. Now, what we're really bringing into coaching here, when our coaching skills, our teaching skills is all about listening, but we're not taught how to listen. So a little tip here when we're going to practice breakthrough listening is to get out of our head and into our heart. This event is called Heart with Ears. And imagine taking all that energy from your heart center and putting it into your ears. That's the space we want to create our attention, our world. Now, a great person that's talked about this and used this skill so well was a guy called Nelson Mandela. And he was an amazing leader because he gave that person in front of him, he was their absolute world. He gave them their full attention. And it started with listening. And he learned these skills from his dad, who was a tribal chief in Africa. And he learned the fact that when we listen, people feel heard, respected, and understood. And one of my favorite distinctions when it comes to listening is that hearing is physiological. All right, hearing is physiological. We can all hear, but listening is psychological. Like listening is a psychological act because we can all hear day to day. You got traffic, you got emails, you got WhatsApp popping off, everything, phone, whatever. But to listen to someone takes psychological commitment. And most of us have been given the gift of having 2 ears and 1 mouth. All right, so technically we should be doing double the amount of listening as we do as talking. And the research shows that when we talk about ourselves, it gives us the same, chemical release as when you eat your favorite food. So imagine eating your favorite chocolate cake, or in Portugal here, I love pastel de natas. I have about probably 5 a week. Imagine eating that pastel de nata and like how great that makes me feel in the moment. Maybe not on my waistline. And that's the same experience you get from talking. That people you see at the parties or in the staff room, the people that love talking about themselves, they get the same chemical release, as eating that. So that's why people love talking about themselves. But what we're doing to improve communication is we're listening to understand not to reply. I've got a friend, and when I have a challenge, I don't really speak to this friend much about challenges, but when I used to, I'd say, hey, I've got this going on for me. And they'd say, oh, well, don't worry about that. This is what happened to me. This is my experience. And actually, a lot of the time, people don't want your experience. They don't want your advice. And a great question to ask here, which I love this distinction, this question is, when someone comes to you with a problem, do you want my advice or do you want me to listen? Do you want my advice or do you want me to listen? And when I ask this to my students in the classroom and in my coaching sessions, most of the time, they just want me to listen to them. And it's giving them that space to be a heart with ears, taking that energy from your heart center, that metta, that bhavana, this like love and kindness that we have here. Metta bhavana meaning loving, the cultivation of loving kindness. And I think it's Buddhist or Pali. So taking this, putting it in your ears and building that connection. And that's what drives connection. Doesn't create disconnection. And it starts by being a heart with ears. So just imagine, ask yourself now, if you improved your listening skills by 5% today, what would happen? So grab your pen. If I improved my listening skills by 5% today, what would happen? And comment in the chat. Write that down. That'd be amazing. Because in coaching, we're all about imagination, right? And thinking, well, if I did this one thing, then what would change? So if you improved your listening skills by 5% today, what would happen to you? And we start that by breakthrough listening. So the next skill I want to share with you all, lovely people, once we've used listening, is we look at questioning. Now, when I started coaching kids, I was a teacher, so I asked questions all the time, mainly about boring history facts. What date was the Battle of Hastings? 1066. Still remember that one. So I was asking history questions, but I didn't really know how to ask questions to help students uncover more about their mental health or emotional well-being. When I started coaching, I found out that the 3 questions I need to be asking begin with what, begin with how, begin with why. And that's really the 3 main questions that we use in our coaching methodology. But I left teaching and I realized the why question, I point to my heart here, the why question is super powerful. It digs for the truth. And with our questioning, we've got to do that. Another history analogy here, a bit like an archaeologist trying to find some buried treasure from, let's say, like the Egyptians or whatever. They're digging through the sand. They see the top level. They're digging for the truth, digging for what's really underneath. And that's what we're doing with our questioning. But when I first started coaching kids, man, I was asking so many why questions. Why? Like, let's use Aslam. Like, why, Aslam, have you not done that? Why have you not taken action? And the why question can feel really accusational, a bit like a parent, pointing a finger at us. And I was getting lots of I don't knows. So I started to realize, well, let's change that questioning technique up. Let's go from like, why, Aslam, did you not take action, to what stopped you taking action? And that little subtle distinction is a bit like putting a cherry on top of the cake, right? The question can be really delicious. It can get a great response. And putting that cherry on top with this different question can help students to access it in a different way. It makes the question sound more juicy, more vibrant, more, you can connect with that question. And then the how question is really just the action. So how can you improve things next time? But it's this relationship in coaching with listening, with questioning. And the last thing I want to share here is the skill of silence. And silence is like the secret Jedi superpower of coaching, I find. And in a world where there's no silence, apart from when you close your eyes at night, there might be silence then. However, for a lot of us, there's no silence. And in coaching, when we give people that space, we give our students that space of silence, it's great for 2 reasons. The first reason we give a bit of silence in our sessions, the first reason is that it helps the student to think of something else that they might not have spoken about. The amount of times I've been like itching to jump in and ask a question, I've held back. And then this young person who I'm working with, he's going through a tough time, has gone off on a tangent and shared something really magical that's really going to help them to better support themselves or to understand themselves on a deeper level. And for me, like giving more silence as a coach, it helps people, the student here, to better express what's really going on for them. But it helps me to create a better question. It helps me to think, well, what could land here for the student? What could be beneficial to them? And silence cuts through the noise, which is a kind of cool quote to think about. Silence cuts through the noise, and it does. A lot of people are afraid of silence, but in Heart with Ears and communication, we're going to bring that silence. So let's just recap, team. Little triangle here. Breakthrough basics. We've got listening, we've got questioning, and we've got silence. And all these three things together combined create a space to become a Heart with Ears. And you might want to comment in the chat, what's your the most important one to you, listening, questioning, or silence? For me, the listening muscle is the most important. And the amount of students that come out the sessions, they just want to be heard and understood and respected. That's all they want. And you could say in this world that we live in, like, we are more connected than ever before. With this thing, we've all got computers in our pockets. We are more connected, but at the same time, I think we're craving proper, meaningful human connection. And the teachers that I always train, who are buddied up and they practice the coaching skills, they feel so connected to one another. It's a bit like removing, this morning we had loads of fog on the beach. Couldn't see the sea. And when we're actually having authentic communication with people, we're becoming a Heart with Ears. It's like the fog disappearing and the sun coming out. And that's the invitation here. But it starts by taking action. You want to become a better communicator. It starts by taking action. You want to become more confident. It starts by taking action. You want to become more motivated. It starts by taking action. And if you want to become a Heart with Ears, it starts by working out what you can do to listen, to ask questions, or to get that silence and space. So thank you so much for listening so far. Anything's landed, please do comment. It'd be great to hear from you in the chat. I think just moving on from the breakthrough basic coaching skills, how else to become a Heart with Ears is by practicing that skill of empathy. And I do this, DTR, I call it, do the reps, right? You don't just go into the gym and do some arms or get in the cross trainer and get healthy and fit. It takes discipline and dedication. And it's the same with your listening skills, with your empathy skills. You can't just join this and expect to become a great communicator. It takes practice. It takes being in the arena, stepping up every single day when you work with young people. And one way you can look at this is a really simple coaching tool, called the iceberg. So if you imagine an iceberg, I wonder if I've got one here actually. I wasn't going to present today, but let's do a little presentation here. I think it'd be quite cool. I love this coaching tool. It's so versatile. Let's present. Let's share screen. There we go. So you can see this, but I was in these slides, but one thing that we can think about when becoming a Heart with Ears is using that skill of empathy, which is putting yourself in someone else's shoes. And in my work I've done in my Buddhist training and practice, which I've kind of fallen off, but when I lived in London, I was in a great Buddhist, did some retreats and things like that. And it really helped me to step into someone else's shoes for the first time. And I did a meditation once, and I was thinking about a student in my form that I was really struggling to connect with. He was in care, he bounced around the care system, very poor behavior, but you can understand that. But I didn't at the time. And I did this meditation, and I, for the first time, put myself in his shoes, and I realized, wow, this is what this student is actually going through. This is what he's really experiencing, and it transformed my relationship with him. So I want you guys to think about this if you're on the session today, which is, let's think about someone in your life. It could be a friend, a family member, a difficult person, a neutral person, and you might write their surface level. He was in my form group, really tough to connect with. But what I started to realize, what pain is this child going through? And I was like, well, he's been in different schools. He's never really had he's got no strong role models. He doesn't know much about himself. What's a challenge he's trying to overcome? Maybe just fitting into a new school. What does he feel about himself? Maybe he actually feels not worthy. He's taking very destructive action, but how can I better support him? And one thing that Buddhist practice taught me all those years ago was to actually treat everyone like an iceberg. Everyone's doing the best with what they can, and everyone has the ability to feel gratitude for their life. But we've got to look beneath the surface, because we just see the surface level, people rushing around. What's really going on? And that's a really important thing to build connection, to become a heart with ears, to get curious. Getting really curious to the world around you and what's going on, and digging for the truth. So that's, for me, how we create a heart with ears, which is using listening, asking questions, and bringing in silence into our teaching, and starting to see students as that iceberg. What's really going on for them. If we imagine an iceberg, what's their surface level behavior, what's going on, and how can we dig for the truth when we work with young people. So the last thing I wanted to share was I've been training teachers in coaching for a few years now. We're actually accredited by the International Coaching Federation. Now, over the summer holidays, if you're a teacher, it's the perfect time to rest. You've made it. Everyone always says, oh, I've survived, which is great. Teaching is about survival sometimes. But in these 9 weeks that we've got coming up, I'm running a session or a program called the Empower Ed Collective. And this is bringing together teachers from all across the world to learn coaching skills, to not only better support themselves, but also the young people that they work with. And each session is led by me. We're going to meet every single week for 90 minutes, do some coach training, discover more about yourself and the world around you, and start to live life in more of alignment with who you are and what you want. Alongside that, you get 2 calls with me. You get a coaching certificate at the end, and you get to join our ECA community, which is going to be super fun. So I've got some testimonials I could actually share with you all. Let me just share. I'll just share this one testimonial, actually. This is from a teacher who completed the last Empower Ed Collective. Here she is. And I love this one. My first ever teacher from Portugal, where I call home now. And Natalie said this: if, like me, you're feeling stuck and unappreciated as a school teacher, then this course is definitely for you. The ECA Empower Ed Collective course I just completed helped me gain awareness and finally take action in my life. And I gained the courage to explore new possibilities. Sam, the coach, is truly amazing. He guides you through various techniques, exercises, and powerful questions that prompt deep reflection and transformation about yourself. By the end of the course, you have gained the ability to help others through a similar transformative process, life-changing experience that I totally recommend. So if you're a teacher who is feeling stuck and unappreciated, if you're a teacher that has heard about this coaching thing and wants to find out more, if you're an educator that wants to lead the classroom and live life on their terms, this is for you. And it takes 90 minutes in a week. And I think I did a post on this. There's 156 hours in a week. It takes 90 minutes. So it can fit around your schedule. Yes, take time to relax. But this is your chance to go back in September with new powers, new skills, new techniques to better support yourself and your students. And if you want some more information on that, let me put the link into the chat here so you can find it. Here it is. And you can find more information via that link in the chat. And I'd love for you to give us any thoughts you've got on this webinar, any feedback. And I want to go back to that phrase at the start that I shared, that it is easier to build strong children than to repair broken adults. Coaching is all about relationships. Teaching is all about relationships. And as always, we are stronger together. Thank you so much for watching. If you commented, appreciate you. And I'll see you soon. Take care.